All right, y'all, we're gonna get this rolling because we know a lot of people is excited about participating and engaging in this conversation. I'll give you a little bit of background on how this topic came up. It actually was born out of some, what I would call barbershop talk, where we were just sitting around engaging some conversation and talking about why we're so silent about certain things within the community that we know are issues, and when we do it, analyze them, we don't do it in a public forum. We'll just do it in the barbershop conversations. And there was an acknowledgement that it's very difficult to change the narrative if we're having these conversations in silos. So it was decided that we would come together for this event. The title of this session is Authentic and Transformational Leadership, Dismantling Milwaukee's Gatekeeper Ecosystem. So I have some questions that I've created to kind of keep the conversation going, but there is an understanding that this is going to be a more organic conversation, so the conversation may unfold in unpredictable ways, and the views of the individuals don't respect the establishment. I'll get that disclaimer for Mr. Hinton up here now. But we'll start off with the first question. What is a gatekeeper? And what is the gate? Yes, let's do that first. My bad.
Good afternoon. My name is Keenan Brunel, and I'm CEO of Global Capital Group, which is a entrepreneurship and economic development consulting firm. I'm also the executive director of the Manufacturing University Institute, and I am co-founder and business development strategist for Intelligent Knowledge for Business Intelligence firm in Madison, Wisconsin. And so, a little bit about my background. I spent 12 years. Excuse me, can you hear me? I spent 12 years as a faculty member and administrator at Auburn University, so that's the greatest love of my life, to be quite honest with you. I was there 2 weeks ago for the Auburn Mississippi State game, so that's what I do for people. I spent 3 years. I was actually Marquette University's first chief diversity officer from 2005 to 2008, and so I have a strong affinity for Marquette. Wonderful place, excellent educational institution, and it has produced solid individuals that are out in society making a difference. After I left Marquette, I went to Colgate University, the first vice president of the university. I came back to Wisconsin in 2011 and started my own consulting. I was a little country boy in Cleveland, Mississippi. So when Reverend Barber was talking about poverty, I was sitting there saying to myself, people in Milwaukee really know what poverty looks like? I mean, really truly know what poverty looks like. I grew up in the Mississippi Delta. I can show you some poverty.
So I graduated from Colgate. I just learned that about you. My name is Emilio DeTore. I am a director of community engagement for the ACLU of Wisconsin. I've been a Wisconsin resident now for 16 years since I moved from New York City. My career track isn't quite as illustrious, but I'll reveal more as we answer questions.
My name is Marjorie Rucker. I am the executive director of the Business Council. The Business Council is a nonprofit organization that helps minority businesses to learn how to engage in supply chains, whether public or private.
Hello, my name is George Hinton, and I'm the CEO of SDC. And the reason why I'm sitting at this on this panel is because April made me do it. No, not really. This is an important subject. I think it needs to be discussed, and I'm really glad to discuss it. I wasn't born in Milwaukee, but I was raised in Milwaukee. I went to school in Milwaukee. I went to ATC, UWM. I did have a chance to go to Marquette, Michael, but I was afraid at the time. So I was afraid it wasn't going to be, very nice to me. So I went to UWM. I was successful. It was a great school, and I ended up with what I got in UWM. I ended up going to my master's degree at the University of Birmingham. I would say though, I did drop out of school and was able to do that. So I represent some people that we help every day who may have made a right turn in life very early on, but it doesn't mean it's a death sentence for them.
Good afternoon, I'm Christy Luzar, and I'm the Executive Director of the Urban Economic Development Association, or UEDA. I've been at UEDA for just about 13 years, and I was born in Wauwatosa, grew up here, went to Madison for school, but have called the city of Milwaukee my home for over 20 years. And so a lot of the work that we do at UEDA, we're a small organization, but we work a lot with collaboration and networks. So a lot of my comments will probably be from the perspective of what it's like to be in a smaller organization, trying to connect with those people that maybe can help your organization grow or the work that you do be more impactful. And so I feel like we're all going to talk a little bit about that, but when I think about a lot of my answers to these questions, it's kind of from that perspective.
Good afternoon, you all. My name is Walter Bond. I'm the Executive Director of Teach for America Milwaukee, education nonprofit designed to end educational inequity. I am a Milwaukee native, grew up on 45th Center, proud MPS alum, any Washington High School folks in here. That's like 4 more than I usually see. And proud Marquette University alum, and I actually am here because George made me. So eager to engage with you all today.
Thanks. My name is Carl Wesley. I guess I'll introduce myself. I'm Carl Wesley, born and raised here in Milwaukee on 22nd and Burleigh. I went to school at the University of Wisconsin-Platteville. I have my undergrad in criminal justice and a theater minor. I have a master's degree in counseling psychology and another master's degree in adult education. And I have a doctorate degree in educational leadership and policy analysis. All right, we're gonna get started. We're gonna kick this off. So, panel, what is a gatekeeper? What is a gate? And is it surrounded by a moat with alligators and snakes?
Okay, so a gatekeeper is someone that pretty much controls your access. It is someone or something that controls your access to someone or something. So we're all gatekeepers of something, whether it's our families, whether it's our job titles, we're all gatekeepers. But just in general principle, that's what it is. The gate depends on what you're trying to obtain, right? And is it surrounded by dangerous things like gators and stuff? Some things are, yes. So, no?
Anybody else want to answer?
No, I'm saying, did you want to answer? Anybody else want?
Let's see, I'll try to use that as something that maybe I've experienced in my career. I think a gatekeeper tends to be a person who intentionally or unintentionally helps to keep things from moving in any productive direction that might be impactful to the change or cause change in the way things are. And I can talk more about that as we go forward.
One road I went down when I read that question was about gated communities. So in my work, we call or name things by communities, like that community over there. I actually had a graduate school professor who said we were never allowed to use the word community because it's not specific enough. Are you talking about a neighborhood? Are you talking about a group of people? And so when you think of a gated community, sometimes gatekeepers are the people who can introduce you as a person of trust in the community. So I think of it at another level too. It's not just resources, but it's those networks. And so if you're trying to work with a certain community of people, are they going to work with you? Maybe not, unless you have a gatekeeper who can help show the way.
So we actually use gatekeeping as a pejorative. When I hear gatekeeper, I think of somebody who has access, who refuses to allow other people to have that access. And frequently in politics, and when it comes to controlling wealth, it's folks who are in a position of white supremacy or fiscal supremacy who prevent other folks from accessing that, whether that's power or it's wealth or it's real estate or it's the development of capital within the community. So we use it, we tell people you're gatekeeping, by not allowing other folks to have access to something.
But for just disclaiming purposes, I want you to know that I was not in the barbershop when this idea was and you have optical view that I was not in the barbershop when this came about. However, for me, I want to attack the gatekeeper thing from more of an organizational systemic scenario. It can be things that are institutionalized processes as well as movements, economic movements. Case in point, the gatekeeper, from an economic standpoint, for me, are the three clusters that are driving, supposedly driving Southeast Wisconsin's economy. What am I talking about? I'm talking about water, cluster. I'm talking about energy, power, and control. I'm talking about food and beverage. And if you've been paying attention to the media lately, there's an IT, an innovation cluster that's being created by several leading corporations. And so gatekeeping means setting up systems that will systematically lock out others from being able to penetrate and participate. Okay? So again, I wasn't at the barbershop, but I do have an opinion about that. Energy, power, and control, water, and food. And I've been in meetings where I've been told, unless you can stick your toe in one of those pools, you can't play. And so that requires a significant amount of educational attainment and skill sets. Okay? And so sometimes it's not just the gatekeepers, but it's the system and the structures that have been built in order to prevent influence for individuals.
One of my favorite quotes by Dr. Martin Luther King is, there comes a time where silence is a betrayal.
Yes.
And what was born out of our barbershop talk was, how do we come together and engage in the public forum and betray the silence? In that, can you describe your understanding or experience with the Milwaukee Gatekeeper ecosystem?
All right. No, we all agree with the snitch,
This is, I think it's a good question. So I spent some time living in, 5 years living in DC. I was a high school teacher and school administrator out in Washington, DC. And I moved back, this is after my time in Marquette, so 2009 to 2014, I was in DC. And when I got back here in 2014, I was sitting having dinner with a good buddy of mine, Lauren Feaster. And we were chatting about sort of some of the differences that I noticed in how I was sort of, treated upon arrival in DC and how that varied, from what my experience was in Milwaukee, having just made it back here. And I do think that there is a pretty noticeable chasm between what I would describe as sort of like grass tops. That's probably the gatekeepers that we've been referring to, and the grassroots, which is the sort of like next generation of up-and-coming talent. And there's not a lot of connectivity between the grass tops, the foremost thinkers, business leaders, politicians, leaders broadly defined, and the sort of, think of the top 10 or 20 millennials you can think of. Those groups are like drastically not connected to one another, and I think that presents some pretty a damning forecast for how we're going to continue to move the needle on stuff that needs intergenerational work, stuff that's going to be things like eliminating poverty, which is a sustained effort over lifetimes. We're going to be ill-equipped to do that unless those two groups of people are a bit more closely connected. So that's how I think of this, as the grass tops not being connected to the grassroots. And I say that as someone who probably belongs to the grassroots, who is attained some success in breaking down those barriers and gaining access. I do actually think access to our leaders is something that I credit Milwaukee as having in spades. There's not a lot of folks in our ecosystem who the people in this room with enough persistence and a few emails can't get a sit down with. for instance, that's not the case in Chicago or New York. You know, they'll try to meet with Jamie Dixon and CEO of Chase Bank. Good luck. But try to meet with the CEO of a banking institution here in Milwaukee. That you can do that in about a month. And so I think we have we've got some requisite pieces to work with here, but a pretty large gap to fill in the middle.
One of the things that I've noticed, and I'm going to be a little bit more unkind to us, and this is not intended to be about anyone, but one of the things I recall as an executive, I tell everybody I'm a recovering healthcare executive, who was asked many, many times to fill out a resume to sit on somebody's board anywhere in this city because they were looking for diversity. I was even called and asked to put it back in because they must have lost it the first time. And I never got called. But one of the things I noticed is the same people sit on every board in this city, and they call that representation for people who look like me. So I look at that as chosen individuals that I define them a little differently, but I won't go there. But I call those people who are safe, not willing to speak to the issues that are important to the people in which they have a duty to serve, not serve, to represent. And they weren't chosen because they were truly able to speak to the issues, but choose to represent the perception of inclusion. And I think that that is an area in which if we don't work on, we will never give our leadership in the city an opportunity to truly begin to understand what they're dealing with in terms of the racism or isms, because it's not just people who look like me that would need to be included in that mix, but also some of the other things that we say we want to address in our community. But we've got to diversify the traditionals to get pulled into every committee. Maybe they get paid. That's good. I would like one of those. But I do think that there's got to be more inclusion and not the same people sitting on those boards if you want to get fresh new ideas, which would include mine.
So I did send out an email to the panelists and sent them the questions, and I just explained to them that I won't put anybody on the spot to require them to answer the question. So when nobody's reaching for the mic, then I'll move on to the next question.
Because I'm thinking along the lines of Gatekeeper, and apparently you guys are Gatekeepers president, right? Based on what you just shared with us. And my question is, then what are you doing to bring about change in your organization? Because health and the other areas, and I've been in corporate America myself for over probably about 20-something years. And we were at one of those lock, stock, barrel companies, and I'll call the name, Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance Company, back in the early 70s. When we as a people, there were only women, few of us black women there. I was fortunate, praise the Lord, to be able to work with some of the managers, but us in charge of, that's the problem. And it's still, it has changed, but it still exists today. So you all as gatekeepers that maybe know that, what are you doing? What change have you brought about in your own court?
I'll take a stab at that. Because to be quite honest with you, I was a little concerned when I accepted the assignment to be a part of this panel, because I remember in August of 2005, there were two sisters sitting near a bus stop right outside of Marquette. And I had been there for 3 months because the provost wanted me to come 3 months before school was going to start, so I could get a good feel of that's not the campus, but Milwaukee. And when I walked past those sisters on my way to one of the sandwich shops, they said, they've been spinning you around town like a brand new penny hat. And so that kind of resonated with me. But little do they know my track record. And the reason I say that is because serving as chief diversity officer at these three very high-profile, prestigious institutions, you either had to do one or two things. You either had to come in and assimilate and go along with the program, or if you were really grounded and you had a soul, then you would try to initiate change. I have a track record of initiating change. And so I started off in terms of faculty diversity, because I understood that if we're truly going to have diverse campuses, we've got to be able to diversify who's in front of our students. And so I worked very hard in order to diversify Auburn's faculty, very hard to diversify Marquette's faculty. Matter of fact, I recruited Marquette's first female dean of the library. I was very instrumental in recruiting the first African-American vice president of student affairs at Marquette. I worked very deeply and very hard behind the scenes to make sure that the business that Marquette was doing was going to be done with people who look like me in this particular room. A couple of years ago, they got an award from Marjorie's organization in terms of stepping it up and stepping up to the plate, but nobody knows that it wasn't the people in purchasing that had initiated that, and all of a sudden they had religion. That was me working behind the scenes to make that happen. It might have taken a couple of years for it to transpire, if that was somebody else taking some bullets and getting beat up to make that kind of change happen. So what I've also been doing as a private consultant in my own personal business is that I try to do an excellent job in terms of my clients, because I know one moment that I mess something up, I mess it up for everybody else that looks like it. So service is the price for the air that I breathe, and I try to significantly overproduce. Not too long ago, I worked with Accenture to have a supply diversity conference back in, I think it was April. Nobody knows the work that I did behind the scenes to make sure that we not only had butts in the seats, but there was sincerity in terms of potentiality of business that might be done. So, like I said, it's about track record. And I think I have a track record that has been proven, and I still go there each and every day.
And from my perspective, I'm a healthcare, I used to be a healthcare executive. And I would say at one point I was not able to see as much as I needed to see. But as I got into a level of the organization and began to ask the question why, for example, why are we not providing healthcare services in poor communities? As a healthcare executive, I began to ask the question to my peers, to people over me. I began to ask, well, why is it that services are being pulled out of my hospital? Why aren't we putting more primary care in places that truly have market potential but tend to be too close to people that look like me? How come we're putting service outside the bus lines and shutting down the services within my own? Well, you ever heard of this concept being on the bus and off the bus? It became very clear that I was off the bus. So I'm not, when you talk about gatekeepers, it's not a, part of it is, I say intentional or unintentional, some of it is you need to speak up, but there is some danger in that speaking up. We have to start making it known that it's, we're going to protect people who speak up. And I'm not saying anybody should protect me, but I remember when I left that organization because I was not on the bus, and I had friends in the community, probably more friends than people knew who were doing what they did. But the first thing they did is they put on the contract every marketing person with the person of color. They did a retainer to make sure there would be no chatter around what happened when Mr. Hinton, George Hinton, was no longer a president. Once the second black president in the state of Wisconsin. And so I was off the bus. And I still haven't heard from another healthcare system that asked me, do you want to work for me? And all I did was ask the question, why? So we do work behind the scenes to make changes. And it's not always easy. And sometimes there's a payback for it.
In addition to, I think, the very significant personal contributions my colleagues have made in these worlds, we also have to ask ourselves systematically, what are we doing to change the status quo? And even the ACLU, as we do these things, we pride ourselves on being the forefront. We are doing things wrong, we have growing problems, leadership and line staff don't necessarily reflect the same. And so we have to keep educating ourselves. We began doing an incredibly larger amount of work with previously incarcerated populations. So we changed our guidelines and we make sure that we're intentionally hiring people that were previously incarcerated. And when we turn around, today I was on a conversation when I dipped out of here to go back to the office, put on a tie. Somebody's offering us money to do something else. And so what we did is we negotiated that contract by saying, this is nice, but we only want to hire previously incarcerated people to work in this. And also, we have to add these things that are significant to our mission. When we talk about raising the next line of leadership, we actively have young people who are 21 and younger on our board of directors with the same voting power as any other person. And it's been that way for 20 years. So if we as institutions, and I'm on several boards myself, you have to challenge ourselves and we have to look past that. Also, those closest to the problem are invariably closest to the solution. So if we're genuinely working in, because we have to take a look at intersectionality too, right? So there's race, there's ethnicity, there's sexual identity, there's age, there's gender, there's homelessness status, house ownership status. Are we including all these layers and are we institutionalizing it? If I ask and I see and I poke and I prod, but I have a bunch of kids and maybe I have to do something else, who's going to take that mantle after us?
I just wanted to round up, one of the things I thought about with this question of the ecosystem here is that my perspective is it tends to look the same a lot, and this kind of speaks to what Walter was saying. And so one of the things that I struggle with, we're a small organization. 12 of the 13 years that I've been at UWITA, we've had 2 staff. This year we had some great opportunities, we're now 4 staff. And when I was hiring, I had to think about who works here now and the kind of work that we do and make sure that we're hiring people who are different from us. And I have a board that's over 50% majority minority. And that's a wonderful legacy that my predecessor kind of created this space. And I know that it's important for the work that we do to make sure that we maintain that. And I rely on that board to challenge me to do the very work that Emilio was just talking about, which is what are we doing to move our organization farther? How can we advance these conversations? And what can we be doing different? And what aren't we doing well? And I think that's an important thing. But we're a small organization, but we have a really diverse network of people doing work in different spaces in economic and community development. So a lot of times I'm trying to think of how can I leverage this network and connect young people, people of color, people of different backgrounds who are not in that ecosystem right now. Like, we have some gateways that we can open up. And so when somebody says, I'm looking for new candidates to serve on this committee, I'll be like, oh, have you talked to this group? Because I'm hoping that they'll get somebody that will change what that ecosystem looks like over time. But I feel like, to your point, there is definitely a chasm. And I think there's a little bit of an anointing kind of a thing that, like, to what George was saying, like, that's the person that we're okay with because we know they're safe. And they can speak for that group. But I don't know, I mean, who wants to be the spokesperson of any group, right? So it's like really about where are some interesting people that I don't know, or how can they challenge us to do our work differently and better and add value to the work that we're doing. But you have to really be open to that and be willing to grow. So it's hard work.
You know, this is the second event that I've been to in probably the last 2 months that this issue in terms of not access, but representation has come up, and I kind of want to address this. While I would be interested in serving on a corporate board, God knows I would rather build my company. You know, that's more important to me. You know, making my company and other companies that are like mine so large that we can start selecting who's going to be on our boards and our advisory groups and that sort of thing. That's much more important to me than being on somebody's corporate board, because first and foremost, if we can take the model that I'm talking about and create more of that, then think about the number of jobs and wealth that will be created in this particular community. So the gatekeeper for me is a lack of contracts, it's a lack of work, it's a lack of recognition that the same level of sophisticated work in terms of research that I do can be done by my company, just like any other company. I know I'm speaking for every other small business owner that's out in this crowd right now. So I just wanted to make mention that, well, you know, if I get a corporate board appointment tomorrow, I probably will accept it, but I'd rather build my company.
And you know, guys, address that and I'll be quiet. I did the same thing. I started, CEO founder of Gatekeeper Educational Center. And I did the same thing. And take craft with my staff, like-mindedness, knew that they had a desire to really dig the trenches for the sake of those children's education. Not just hiring someone because they were DPI certified, but that they had that fluff and humanness that these children need. And we just built it forward.
I think also in this is we have to be aware of the sheep in wolf clothes.
Okay.
Because we have people who they may appear to be gatekeepers, but they ain't got the key. So that's a piece that we got to be mindful of as we engage in this.
Hi. Organizations depend on funding. And my question for you is how you deal with, as leaders, with funders that are not ready to disrupt the systems, that are actually either are not educated or are part of the system.
You know, as the Social Development Commission is built to speak, and I will tell any organization that has trouble speaking, partner with us. We'll speak for you. We'll find people who can speak that are not going to impact your funding, but will say what you need to be heard in the community. We have to stop chasing funds.
Yes.
And come up with strategies to speak to truth.
Come on.
To speak to power. And we've got to go past what I consider to be, what did you call them, Carl? Sheep. Yeah. Because for me, I don't care what color of wool you got. If you're in the way, you need to be taken out. And so SDC is built as an advocacy agency to speak to power. Not in a negative way, but in a collaborative way. And that collaboration isn't possible. Then it needs to be spoken to in a different kind of way. Because we're talking about our people, we're talking about our communities. And right now we're dealing with issues of justice. In some cases, we're fighting systems that are designed in a way that are keeping, no matter how much we care about something, it's not gonna happen unless we get certain people in certain organizations with certain power to appreciate that those systems need to be examined, looked at, and tore down. Now, and I go back to something Mike Lovell said from Marquette. We have to begin to at least do the assessment part and ask the question, are we contributing to, or are we being a benefit to our community?
I lose a lot of sleep over this question because I raise money in a very tough fundraising environment. So my organization runs on $2 to $3 million a year. We raise that, I'd say 90% of that is private philanthropy, and we're funded across the political spectrum. So the most far left-leaning foundations, organizations, and the City of Milwaukee Fund Teach for America, most far right-leaning also Fund Teach for America, which puts me in a very interesting position. I tie the answer to this back to the answer to the last question on, or the last conversation on sort of like who's on your board. And you know, the young lady's last question, that was the first time I've been called a gatekeeper, so thank you. You know, but we, you know, our organization, which recruits and trains leaders who begin their leadership journey with classroom teaching, is, you know, roughly 30 to 40% teachers of color, in a market that's where we have around 12% teachers of color. Our staff is roughly 75% leaders of color, and our board of directors, which has some of the most esteemed folks in our market, is roughly 50% leaders of color or women of color, or excuse me, leaders of color or women. And I think my board provides the necessary cover for me. The reason you need some of those folks on your board is to provide the cover for me to say the things that I need to be said, that I need to say or that need to be said without compromising funding opportunities. An example of this is that we stood at odds with a local foundation over Teach for America's stance on DACA. We have undocumented teachers, many of whom are on the south side of Milwaukee, doing absolutely groundbreaking, incredible work on behalf of students, teaching students who are themselves undocumented. And our organization has come out very strongly in favor of DACA and the need for a long-term solution to the immigration problem that we have. And that was at odds with the sort of political stance of a funder, and that put at risk a $200,000 grant. Pretty critical when you're raising $2 million, that's a large chunk of money. In the conversation with that funder, we ended up retaining that grant. And the conversation with that funder was, the reason that was made possible is because I had a board member there with me who was able to sort of build this bridge between why our organization would be taking a stance and why we're out on it so firmly versus the sort of political leanings of the foundation. And so I think it's really critical to have those folks on your board. And I think that, the bigger issue than sort of like us patting ourselves on the back for our diversity numbers is the question of what can we be doing, is that if you fast forward 10 to 15 years from now, those folks are all going to be retired. And there is a certain level of skill, competency, gravitas, et cetera, that's necessary to be able to walk into a room and bridge a divide like that. And so what we can be doing is prepping the folks who are going to be of age and of sort of status in those 10 to 15 years to be ready to fill that void versus, just hoping that we can get folks to stick around for long enough to sit on our boards and be able to provide that kind of cover for executives.
That's a great segue to the next question. When you do encounter gatekeepers, what tactics do you employ to access the resources or to gain the access you seek?
So I'll answer that. I'll start with that. So what I do is I basically show them how it's a benefit for them more than it is for me, or it's a win-win, because people are more inclined to do something when they feel like they're going to get something out of it. So even though it may feel like you're giving away the pie, right? You have to kind of show them what they're getting out of it, what the benefit is of it. For her personally, in my experience, so my job is very hard. I meet gatekeepers all the time. First 2 years, my job was gatekeeping, right? So learning how to manage and navigate through that on a public and private level with corporations, as well as with a lot of my business owners who had great information that they could share. Some of them are more willing than others because they need to warm up to me. They need to trust me. They need to understand my vision and what I was doing with the organization. So it was really having those critical talks and sometimes saying, hey, this is why I need this is what it's going to do for us, it's what it's going to do for the collective. And when really communicating that clearly and spelling it out, sometimes in dollars and cents. And a lot of us have, very backroom conversations, right, about what this process looks like, but that's pretty much what it is that we do. I also want to touch on the question of funding, okay? Most of us in this room probably are raising funds for our organizations, or there's someone within our organizations that are. There's not enough money collectively in Milwaukee to solve the problems that are going on, okay? It's just not, whether it's $2, $3 million, whether, we see those big campaigns from some of our partners, $50 million, and we're all clapping and we're there. It's not enough to solve the problem. Most of that money is gonna get eaten up in admin costs and programming costs. And you're still going to have the same problems that we're going to stay on the same hamster wheel trying to eradicate. So I think what we need to do, and I know Christy spoke to this, and I know Mr. Hinton has spoken to this thus far, is really collaborating, okay? We really need to start having conversations. So the same conversations that I have with, those gatekeepers are the same conversations that I have with partners when there's an issue that comes up to say, hey, we need to start, having this conversation, what is your perspective on this issue? What are other partners that we need to bring in? And even if we're sitting out to dinner or at a barbershop or whatnot, having that very authentic conversation, and then from there, pulling in the resources that we need to solve that issue. But it's not money, because none of us are getting enough to do what it is that we need to do effectively in the city of Milwaukee to impact some real change.
I'm a private business owner, so I'm gonna have to approach this from a totally different perspective. When I come in contact with a gatekeeper, that means client to me. So what do I have to do with a potential client? I have to build a relationship, okay? So I'm gonna be candid with you. I'm not trying to lead a movement, okay? I'm not trying to be the next great civil rights leader. What I'm trying to do is be one of the great business leaders. And so, how do you do that? You build relationships. And let's be honest with you, and if we're gonna have an authentic conversation, one of the ways that you build a relationship is that you're able to answer the question, what's your value proposition? That's the new buzz phrase, and if you can't do that, and you got a business, then you probably gonna have problems with many more gatekeepers that are out there, okay? And then you got to be able to deliver, okay? Now, one of the things that I mentioned several weeks ago in a speech I gave, a couple of months ago that I gave at the public library, we have way too many nonprofit organizations in the city of Milwaukee. We are probably per square inch more nonprofit entity than any other urban environment in the United States. There is an imbalance between nonprofit CEO leadership and African American private sector, significant CEO leadership. We will always be having conversations about gatekeepers and more gatekeepers when there's a consistency of this imbalance in terms of how our leadership is able to lead and where they are able to lead. So I just thought that I would add that, and I'm gonna pass the mic because my dad was very fearful of me participating on this panel.
My name is Brittany, and I just wanted to provide some feedback about education. I work for the Department of Workforce Development, and I work primarily with high school students. In working with them, they are on two different tracks, a certificate of completion and a high school diploma. I don't know if you guys have heard of the certificate of completion, but mostly it's just saying good job for going to school. You can go until your time up. When you exit school, there's not a lot of potential for going to a university or getting a job. So I feel like that puts a lot of students that I work with at a disadvantage. Most of them students of color, and they have disabilities, so you have a lot of disadvantages going on. My question is, how can I, as a counselor, address this issue? And who is the gatekeeper? Because I need to have a conversation.
So I would say, Brittany, what you need to do is first learn of all the different resource providers out there and what they're offering, okay, to the demographic that you serve, okay? So I know the SDC is a great resource. I know that there are several others that are here at this conference that are a resource. And I think that you need to just learn what the footprint looks like, okay? Then from there, based on what your student is looking to obtain. So, I mean, if you're having conversations one-on-one, which I'm assuming you're doing, you need to ask them what it is that they want. Where do they see themselves in 5 or 10 years? Because I think that answer will kind of give you what you need to then put them into the path that they need. A lot of times, communication and education and just knowing what's available, because a certificate of completion sounds a lot easier than completing the whole high school curriculum, especially if you're behind a couple of years, you dropped out and whatnot. But if that student says, well, I want to enter into a particular trade, or I want to do this, if you are aware, you know the resources that are out there that are offered through several different partners, you can then say, okay, yes, you can do your certificate of completion, but also call this provider so that they can help you to get into their pipeline when you're trying to do something. So I think that's the thing, but we need to make sure that you're connected with the right people.
So my issue is not that they can't complete the certificate of MPS is not providing the resources for them to be able to reach their full potential. They target them and label them with the IDP and say you're not able to do this, but they don't have the resources for them to be able to assess accurately their abilities to be able to complete a high school diploma, which then put them at a disadvantage.
So the statement I made before about like they don't wanna do it, so we can't worry about them, even though they got the money to do it, they're not gonna do it. That was my nice way, my last comment on the last question of saying that. We need to get you within the right ecosystem so that when you're helping your students, they have those viable options, because the one thing Milwaukee is very guilty of is operating in silos. I'm gonna call somebody, they're gonna give me what I need, and that's where it stops, right? But you know, what we need to start doing is having those conversations, so the knowledge that you get from me and us connecting you, which will then expand your network moving forward, is what's going to help those babies to get what it is that they need. Because MPS is not going to solve the problem. And I don't work for MPS, but I'm going to speak for them. They're not gonna do it.
MATC is a good connect for those students. When they get 18 to 21 years of age, you get them into the MATC. They have an explicit program that can guide them, steer them into the area they want to go. Agreed. It's called program.
Brittany, I'll share very briefly. Brittany, as a question near and dear to my heart. I was a special education teacher for 5 years of high school students, and I think of this in two ways. Number one is figuring out the set of people, connections, advocacy organizations, lawyers you need to be connected to make sure that students who deserve to be on a diploma track who are not find their way there. And there's been significant mislabeling, IEPs written terribly, so on and so forth. And then the second is to sort of like shift the gears of the conversation. If we frame, success in terms of college access, then, a certificate of completion, this kind of harkens to Marjorie's point, then a certificate of completion can be sort of a damning document that precludes, success in life. If we frame the conversation, and I'm very glad to see our sort of like national dialogue shifting in this way, if we frame it in terms of economic mobility, then a certificate of completion for those who do need to be on a certificate track, and there are students with disabilities that require them to be on a certificate track, that does not have to be does not have to spell disaster for their sort of prospect in life. And I'm really, really proud of the students that I taught in Washington, D.C. who are on a certificate track, who are making six figures now because of the way that they were sort of set up on the trajectory of their lives and opportunities that were put before them. And so let's get kids off of certificate tracks who don't need to be there, and then let's also ensure that we're not sort of writing off kids who are on a certificate track because they can experience economic mobility as well.
Mine is a combination because it deals with, first I want to thank Mr. Hendon because by him doing what he did with the hospitals, when they, all of a sudden the hospitals started having community meetings to try to get so-called grassroots involvement. But there's a problem I found was that the clinics of those hospitals do not negotiate or have a navigator to deal with the service entity of the hospital when it comes to actually giving the actual services. This I feel find is how would you say it? I feel they hadn't really planned on doing navigation to incorporate the two so that the actual services that should be coming to the community, the only time Black folk are involved with these areas when they show them as clients. And when they show people as clients, but the people who are handling it are basically all white, male females, basically, majority of them. And this is a problem I have in relationship to this. In order to solve some of these situations, there's got to be a communication, the navigator, the person who gives the service at the so-called, I think they're supposed to be non-profit hospitals, but to me they're all for profit. And the clinics, who also are the so-called non-profits, they can only do so much. They don't seem to collaborate with each other or navigate so that the people in the community really benefit. This is a basic problem with our whole society. Everything is put out in different entities to make it look like I'm here to help you, but I really don't give you what's necessary to do the communication with the necessary people to actually implement the things that will really help you, especially when it comes to the health situation.
if I could jump in, and I want to thank you, Ms. Rose, because I think you're a living solution to taking care of gatekeepers. I see you everywhere and have consistently for 15 years. And just a quick follow-up, because I want to switch gears on this. If anybody has specific information for our friend in this corner on how to navigate, please share your information with her later, because I think that that's very vital. When we're talking about gatekeepers, though, in addition to each of these specific things, we have to ask ourselves, what are they gatekeeping? And if it's a status quo, and if that status quo is white supremacy, and if it's the continued denial of access to wealth and capital and resources for folks in Milwaukee, the funding system for the public schools in Milwaukee is determined by the state. So the state has been consistently abusing a city of the first class, which in Wisconsin only means Milwaukee, and it only means Milwaukee for one reason. Then we have to address not only the individual lack of resources to folks, but the people who have systemically and generationally robbed the people that have lived in Milwaukee. If we're talking about, because we can't just be nice to gatekeepers. They might be a client, but we might have to turn around and sue them. And we might have to call them on the carpet, and we might have to expose them in the newspaper, and we might have to point out the fact, and there's a great book by a guy named Ian Haney Lopez called Dog Whistle Politics, that they are using code words, and they are using euphemisms to talk around folks to pretend it's economic when really for them, it's not. It's ideological or it's racial. And we can be as PC as we want. Thank you. Your buddies. I owe you $20. But we have to call these things out because sometimes we can't be nice. And it's easy for me because I am working for a nonprofit, and we do have, we're a mission-driven organization, but we accept no government funding. And why is that? Because you can rely on us to sue the government. If I'm collecting money from President Trump and he's doing some racist nonsense, I can't turn around and sue him, can I?
You know, you mentioned, I think, if you don't mind my attempting to address the question that you asked, I think that you were asking for a larger engagement around the concept of community engagement. And so if we were to do an audit of all of the major corporations, the educational institutions, the more larger nonprofit organizations, they might have strategic plans, but they don't have community engagement plans. And so the community engagement plan would require you to do something different. It would require you to set up communication infrastructures that would put you close to the ear of the community in which you serve, not in terms of just the services, but what's the heartbeat of those entities. So the point that I'm trying to make is that until the entire ecosystem matures in this area with more of a community engagement infrastructure and mentality, we will always have people coming to these kinds of, scenarios and asking these kind of questions, because a real community engagement infrastructure is not a senior-junior partnership relationship. It's a senior-senior partnership relationship with those who are being served at the forefront of being able to have access channels, making sure that corporate or university or governmental entity has clear communication channels in terms of what's important. So I thought I wanted to just interject that.
Good afternoon. I'm gonna really date myself. I've been around a long time, and I have watched the careers of Christy, George, Marjorie, and when Dr. Grinnell first came to Milwaukee. And I'm here to say that I am extremely proud of all of you, because I've seen a shift since you all have taken over, and now people are starting to do collaborations. Because when I started my career, people rather go out to Evergreen and die before they tell you something, or they rather die in office and not have a succession plan. So now I've seen that all of you collaborate, you work with each other, and you have put in place services that do, for us some of you who just started out, these folks have really stood on the shoulders of others and have learned that you cannot do that anymore. You can't be that gatekeeper, because it's impossible. And like Marjorie said, just some people chasing the same dog. There's not enough money to go around in the first place. So I applaud what you're doing, because see, the world isn't the same when I started. You know, it was a typewriter. Y'all got computers. So it is just awesome to see what you're doing. And the young lady with that completion and certificate, that's a bunch of bull. You need to call Dr. Valencia Brown at MATC, Dr. Valencia Brown. You need to call her, and you need to talk to George. George has, at SDC, they have a fabulous GED program that helps people who cannot get a GED or the regular or HSED through regular routes, but they have a system that works. So these folks have been, I mean, they got it going on with writing checks. And then the Teach for America, they didn't have that before, where they were teaching teachers of color, you know, to bring black folks into the school system. So now they have that. So we gotta take advantage of what they got and then go on and build on to what they got and make it better. Because like they said, we're gonna be retired, because trust me, that's what I'm at. And this road, we've been out here for a long time fighting for y'all. And so now it's your time. And take advantage of your time. Because trust me, we watching y'all. Because we don't want to come back to work. Okay? And thank you all for what you're doing and keep on doing that good work that you're doing. And we're gonna
you have one back here and one over there. What do you front? She was before. She had her hand up for a while. You want them now?
Hi, my name is Sheila, and I just have a question for all of you. How do you deal with the political gatekeepers, our legislators, and our funders who work together so that they can keep giving the same money to the same old people doing the same old thing? So how do you do that? And then, secondly to that, how can we back you up? Because if you're going to step out on it, too many of us sit back and want somebody to step out, and we don't want to step with them. And then we run it hot. So what can we do to help in that situation?
That was the next question, so I'm
So I'm gonna pass the mic to you, because I know that this is the dog in the fight, but I'm just going to say this. You need to use your voices, okay? Not just your vote. I need y'all to hear me on that, okay? I need you to use your voices. What are the issues that are important to you? And you need to voice that. And when your politicians, whether they're local, whether they're county, whether they're state, whether they're federal, I need you to make sure that they are talking to you about what your needs are, okay? Those needs, they all got numbers. They got websites, they got numbers about the wazoo of who you can call when you have an issue, okay? All the way down to your alder person, let's say some illegal dumping going on, and DPW is giving you the business, call your alder person and let them know, okay? Because you ain't gonna charge me $150 to come pick up somebody else's trash, but I'll make sure my alder person takes care of that, because that's what I paid them to do, and all of you as well, okay? So understand that and start making your voices known, and when people are out talking about you, and Reverend Dr. Barber said it perfectly, you know, we are not using our voices to express what's important to us with these politicians. Nobody talks about poverty, nobody talks about how it impacts people. They're talking about all these high level things because they're chasing votes. What's important to you? So when you start getting those texts and those emails, we need you to contribute $5, we're almost there, whatnot, I can give you a tip. I need you to tell me what you're gonna do about this, right? Before you get my contribution, before you get me out there passing around your information on all my social media platforms to go and register a vote for you. So please start using your voices.
I would add to that there's this friend ecosystem here, and I run into it and I have conversations and hear people talk about it, where a person could be in a role, whether it's a political role or a leadership role in the community, and they're bums. And because they're friends and we like him, and he's a good brother, so they don't want to go against him because he's been around, or we know his dad and things like that. And we got to move away from that. I got friends that I love to death. I'll help them out. And I got some friends that I wouldn't hire them to wash my car, but they still my friends.
So when Carl sent this question, I was like, I don't honestly think of politicians as really being part of gatekeeping in the world I work in, because a lot of what the work we do, we go around them. Because right now, it's about, like Marjorie said, it's not just about the votes, but it's about telling them what is important to you. And also to actually tell the ones that are doing the good work to say thank you, because that's the feedback we get when we're reaching out to them. They say, all you do is complain, we don't hear we're not doing something. But I will say, the trend I'm seeing really for nonprofits is that, and what this conference is really about, is systemic issues. Issues that we're recognizing more money in social services, more money in this program, more money to this is not going to fix it. We're talking about racism, we're talking about institutionalized, we're talking about the educational system, and that's where we need them. And so I feel like we're at this sort of precipice where we need them to start doing the work that they should be doing, not chasing votes. And that's where the advocacy piece, a lot of nonprofits have been doing that work for a long time because of the funding issues. Like, we don't want to do this. But I've seen and known members in our network and other nonprofit folks that do capacity building, there's a sea change going on. It's starting with staff and boards who are saying, all right, we've been doing these services for this long, but we got to start doing advocacy work. And how are we going to find the resources to pay for that person? Because right now the funders are only paying for programs and services. And when we are prepared to do that work, who are the politicians and the elected officials that are going to help us get the changes that we needed done? And so I feel like there's a shift going on in that space, and that they are part of a gatekeeping system, but we have to be prepared to really tell them what we want. And I think, Reverend Barber's talk was about that. And we have to hold them accountable, not just for votes that they do, but what are you doing to really work on issues of poverty? I don't care about this other thing. I want you to work on this issue, because it's hard, and we need you to help us.
One of the things that I want to just mention real quickly, one of the ways that I deal with local politicians, and they will all tell you, they run from me when they see me coming. Because the first question that I ask them is, what is your economic development portfolio? And so I can't change the world overnight, but that one little slice of a portfolio that needs to not only be built and cultivated, but needs to be robust and needs to be impactful. I'm always asking that particular question. So I don't need to be the only person asking the local alderperson or the county supervisor or anyone else, or even those individuals who are in bureaucratic positions, because they too have power, they do have access to resources. What's your economic development portfolio? Because it's really about economics. I'm sorry, my great-great-great-great-grandfather, in terms of my intellectual side, was Booker T. Washington. And I'm not ashamed to tell anybody that. So what's your economic development portfolio as an African American or any person of color politician?
Can I just say, and I agree with God in terms of economics, however, but when we talk about this end, we give our politicians way too much power. This is a democracy, and we vote them in office to represent us as people. They represent the people. They are not our bosses. They're not our guard. They don't tell us. We should be telling them. I don't understand this personally because, if we are in a democracy, we should be talk, we vote a person in, we tell them what to do. That is the way it is supposed to be. We keep saying, we should make sure that they're supported. No, they got to support us because we voted them in. We got to change the whole mindset of what a democracy is. Right now, it's controlled by corporate money is telling them what to do, and not by people telling them what to do. We don't do a good enough job of holding our elected officials accountable to the words in which they spoke about when we elected them. If they don't do what they are supposed to do, you get them out, even if you have to take them out before it's their turn. But we've got to stop allowing our politicians to tell us they're going to do something and just do whatever the hell they want to afterwards. Okay? And I'm not saying that because I'm mad at the system or anything, but you can't have a democracy over here and capitalism over here and expect that they're going to work together. They're supposed to work in tandem, but they're not supposed to be seduced. One's not supposed to seduce the other. So if we're gonna educate, let's educate right. Let's not just talk about what they can do for us, tell them what they're supposed to do for us. Because that's what we voted them in. I'm sorry, it's simple to me. It's like, that's the way they taught me civics way back when. I don't know what happened to it since then, but once upon a time they said you voted in somebody, they're represented, that's what they call representatives, because it's supposed to be representing you. So that would be mine, Doc.
Hey, so thank you to the panel. You are all brilliant minds. I'm so glad you're here. Because I'm late, check me if I missed the question or if I'm jumping ahead. But we have a phenomena of levels of gatekeepers. So there are gatekeepers that keep the access and determine who, what, when, and where are worthy of the resource, or who is the most informed or the most knowledgeable individual on a subject, pick a subject, any subject. And so there's a conditioning that's happened in the funding environment where they only trust this gatekeeper to advise them on who that is. Tactically, from the perspective of entrepreneurs, CEOs, executive directors, and advocates, how can you advise at that level to individuals who are contributing to the work, but who are frustrated with being locked out socially? And, if you, it does, because we know that living in Milwaukee, you can say one thing wrong about the right person, and you are not in the cool kids club anymore, and you're doomed to hustle and make $1 out of 50 cents for the rest of your time. So I know that was a lot, but can you just address that frustration, because I know you have to be experiencing it, because I've witnessed it for far too long.
So, I think that when we, meaning us as partner organizations, became aware of that, we started collaborating, okay? Because we understood that we couldn't break the glass, okay? It's kind of like a glass ceiling, right? Same concept. First of all, there is nothing to keep. There's no gate. There's not enough economic wealth within our community, meaning Black and brown. Oh, okay, I was like, but I was like, wait a minute, no. But no, seriously, there's not enough economic contribution to the isms and all of the work that we collectively in this conference are trying to fight, right? So there's really no gate to keep. There are, however, people that are chosen, okay, to be that token. We talk about tokens in a lot of our, right? To kind of be that representative and that voice, knowing that they will not contribute anything, but they feel good because they get invited to the country club or whatever, right? They get to hang out. That being said, okay, when we figured that out, meaning a lot of us sitting on this panel and in this room, we still go to some of those chosen ones to get what we need, but then we start collaborating and getting it out so that it can be effective and impactful for the work that we do, okay? Sisters not gonna go away, okay? The old guard, as we call them, okay, is passing their batons, okay? And we all know that. We see this. Some of us are a little bit more aware of it than others. We know that it's happening. We're not gonna sit here and lie about it. Again, I don't know what they're keeping though, because there's not enough of anything they're keeping that's going to help us do any of the work that we do. However, what we can do is we can talk to some of these people, for those of us that have access, okay, and all of us don't have the access. We're not gonna tell a story about that either. But I know that for people that do, I call them, okay? I'll point some of y'all out, I'll call them, get what I need from said gatekeeper, and then work collaboratively with my partners to make sure that I'm having a positive effect.
I'm gonna do and yes, and. First and foremost, I want us to, at least I want to speak for myself. I am not here to belittle, say anything negative about people who are successful. Because I think we have to be very careful and toe a line. People have worked hard and they've crossed their T's and they've dotted their I's to be able to ascend to some of the positions that they now occupy. So I'm not here to castigate those individuals. But what I am here to do is to challenge them to utilize the position and power that they have. And at the end of whatever it is, calendar year, look back and see what impact have I had? Whose life have I changed? How have I moved the needle? Well, let me say this. I don't know if any of you have looked at the most recent Biz Journal, Biz Magazine. MMAC has asked several corporations to sign a document, almost like the Magna Carta to a certain degree, to talk about inclusion and diversity and to unleash it. So they talked about the various metrics that are out there that they want to be able to hold themselves accountable to. One of the things that I would ask this audience to do is to make sure that these 61 organizations and growing, make sure that those gatekeepers are part of the network. Making sure that whatever is unleashed, they make sure that our communities get plenty of it. Okay? And so there are ways of holding people accountable for the positions that they sit in. I'm not here to castigate successful individuals because, like I said, a couple of years ago, I might not have been sitting on this panel. You all could have been, probably some of you all could have been addressing this towards me because you didn't know where I was and what I was doing. You just maybe assumed because the position that I was holding that I was a major gatekeeper. And so we have to also do our research and do our homework because everybody that's chief diversity officer at institution, somebody who's holding a supply diversity position in one of the major corporations of diversity position, or public affairs or community engagement person. Everybody is not out to keep us from the goodies, but we got to hold those individuals accountable for the resources and the opportunities that we seek out.
Yes, and Doc, I think we also need to ask our corporations that we need to stop having jobs beyond community relations and diversity officers. We need to have jobs in the decision-making tree so that we can begin to actually be able to speak to the resources and allocation of resources. So, yes, I don't think we should be attacking people where they're at, but we have to begin to ask our organizations to begin to promote people where it's going to make a difference.
The only thing I'd briefly add to that is it seems like there's two schools of thought whenever this gatekeeping conversation comes up. One is to sort of eliminate gatekeeping, and two, which is, and even sort of a topic that's arisen today. I take a slightly different bend, which is that I think certain things should have gates around them and gatekeepers. I want a gatekeeper determining, for instance, who can become a doctor or who can become a nurse. For instance, the question is how do we get thoughtful, just, equitable gatekeeping versus what I think we identified as the problem that we have now. And I think that's actually at the root of the last question as well, which is about politicians. I don't view the question, I mean, I know a bunch of these folks, and I don't view the problem as that they like got on the campaign trail and told us they were gonna do a bunch of stuff and then got into office. They just lied to us and got into office and did whatever they wanted. I think they got into office and then realized that what they said they would do on the campaign trail is actually quite a bit more difficult in practice. Because what we talk about on the campaign trail is at the level of politics. Politics being the idea generation that happens. We should eliminate poverty, we should have community schools, we should have funding for this, we should end homelessness, so on and so forth. But then when you're actually in the seat and you need to sort of like move a tanker ship with lots and lots of complexities, I think they don't know what the hell they're doing once they get in the seat. And that gets back to this sort of like this grooming, is sort of like preparation of the next generation. We need folks who are, like our bench for the top 20 political positions in the city is just awful. It's just god awful. Like name a seat on a school board or county board or mayor's office, et cetera. Like you can't give me 3 candidates who you're really excited about, who've been sort of like preparing for a decade, studying, so on and so forth. Our bench is awful, and thus we get people who say things. We get young people who, often young people who get up and say like, yeah, I want to run for office, I want to make change, I want to do this, and who speak at the level of ideas and then realize it takes quite a bit of nuance to move the complex systems that they're trying to move, and that takes grooming. We have to sort of like an intentional investment in the skills and competencies of the up and coming generation.
So I'd like to add something to that, if I may. So you see us here, and some of us are new to one another, but some of us have had relationships for a long time, and I'd like to offer a little something. So I've had the pleasure of working with SDC, with Teach for America, and other folks for a while. People don't know, there will always be gatekeepers, okay, regardless of what we want to do, and there will always be a lack of education to know who is the gatekeeper. So it's not only who you know, it's what you know. If I don't know who's in charge of bus lines, if I don't know who's in charge of funding for a school system, if I don't know who's in charge of the prison system, then I don't know where to go to fix my problem. And I can speak about politics forever, but I won't. But I will let you know, if you want me personally or my staff to come to your organization for free, if it's a nonprofit organization or education organization, we will and will teach all those things. Who to go, how to go, where to go, what you do, for free. If you have young people that need grooming, November 11th, UWM, we're gonna have, Kwame has mentioned it before, 350 high school students for free, 100 plus college students for free, learning, 32 workshops for free from other nonprofits. If we want to build a beloved society, we have to not only continue to have this legacy that George has carried on with SDC and this wonderful annual convention, but make sure it's there for our babies too. Because we can't turn around on this side of 50 where I am and say, oh snap, I didn't do this. We have to start sowing those seeds when they're younger so that by the time they're at this convention, they're here and it's bigger and it's better and they're the gatekeepers.
I just want to add, I think that brings to circle a little bit what I was trying to talk about with advocacy, and I feel like in the nonprofit sector, that's where we've really done a disservice by not being a part of the advocacy conversation because we haven't been doing the education of our elected officials on these issues. Like, they just don't know like why it's so complex, why it's so hard to solve these problems. And part of it is because we've not been there at their door saying, did you know we work with these students and this is some of the challenges that they're facing, and this is why it's important. So that's why when you talk about gatekeeping and advocacy, I feel like a lot of it is really about education. But then I'm sure Amelia would have a lot to say this, you know, nonprofits have to be careful about what are you doing is issue advocacy, or is it political, or is it education, right? So that gets to this awareness that we have to build our own muscles to think about how we can do that work better. And I just wanted to add before I forget, I feel like gatekeeping is a lot about trust. And so we talked a little bit about who knows what and who knows who. And so a lot of this is about building relationships of trust. And I would say to Ava's question, find an ally. Marjorie's my ally. You know, like, who can I trust to have and be like, what's that person really like? Should I be saying that to them? Because those are the things where I know I don't know how to move in certain circles or who to talk to, but if I can find a couple allies to help me figure that out, like, and spend my time there, that gets me a little bit further.
I want to say something real quick. Sometimes a community can be its own gatekeeper. Now, let me tell you where I'm going with this. There are probably 1,300 science, technology, engineering, and math programs throughout the 7-county area that calls itself M7. How many, what do you think the percentage is of Latino and African American students in those programs? Very, very few. That's why you don't see butts in the seats in engineering programs and in STEM programs at area universities. And there's a reason for that, is because that bench has to be developed at a very early age. And as parents, we push our kids towards summer camps in terms of football. And I know what I'm talking about. I was birthed in one of the biggest athletic budgets in the country, Auburn University. More African American kids in the summer football and basketball programs than in science, technology, engineering, and math. Well, let me give you a little stat. You're more likely to become the mayor of a major metropolitan city than it is then you will become a National Basketball Association member. It's only so many butts in those particular seats that you can occupy. And so when we set ourselves up for the okie doke, then we end up with okie doke results. So we have to be very smart about playing in this new economy. And STEM or STEAM or whatever you want to call it is that pathway. So we got to make sure we know where the access points are and we participate. Because if not, in 100 years from now, we're going to be talking about gatekeeping. But we would have been the major gatekeepers.
You have one back here.
So real quickly, this is gonna kind of be a spin-off to a lot of comments that were made. One is, I guess so first of all, I wanna say thank you to Christy and thank you to Marjorie personally, because I'm recently a full-time business owner and they've been very instrumental in helping to push my business forward, which would not have been possible because of some gatekeeping and other things that there's no need to discuss right now. But I thank you guys publicly for that support and the ongoing support that both organizations and you as individuals have provided in those organizations. Secondly, I want to say, I wonder what is being done to simplify the message. I'm a person, I'm a Milwaukee transplant, but I'm a person who has always been one to go into any room where the door is open, and even if it's locked, I'll knock, or get in however I can get in. But I think that part of the problem, both community-wise, organization-wise, and city-wise, is that an organization specifically I'll start with, is that the gatekeeping isn't the problem. What are you doing is the problem. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Do you have standards? Do you have a goal? You want to work in the community, but what are you trying to accomplish in the community? And what is can we identify what moving the needle looks like? Because I've worked for some organizations, and I won't say their name or say anything negative, but there's no needle and there's no measure. And even when producing without the needle and the measure, they still can't tell you the needle and the measure. And so poverty is a humongous issue, but what are organizations collectively doing to say, what are we doing? And how are we communicating that message in a way that's simple enough for people who don't have a whole life to research? Because most working people can't, research who is the gatekeeper on all the levels of gatekeeping that there could possibly be. Most people don't do that. But how is that message being communicated in a way where people can figure out how can I join on to this cause in a way that's effective?
I am so thrilled that you brought that comment up. When I got to Milwaukee, I came from University of Wisconsin-Madison, my last post, and a lot of things that we did at the university were rooted in research and evaluation. You can't come with a new program if you don't have your metrics of assessment. It's got to be built on the front end. And I was so surprised because of the overwhelming amount of nonprofits in the city and the dismal amount of research and evaluation that was connected to the outcomes. And it speaks back to when we talk about the gatekeep, because, and this is where I have my issue with the niceties of complexities when it comes to this, is because there are a lot of agencies in this city who get access through gatekeepers, and they've been doing the work that they've been doing for 20 years, and they're ineffective. They're object failures, and they continue to receive funding. So I can tell you, one of the things that when I came to the table having this conversation is proposing to do just that, to set up some assessment evaluation. My agency is doing some assessment evaluation with BMAC and my brother's Keeper this year, but it's starting there, but I think that there's a lot of funds and resources that get doled out, especially at the city and state level, that don't have any assessment or impact evaluation connected to it. So we have programs that have been operating for a long time, and we have only anecdotal evidence of their success. When you ask the CEOs, so what does the success look like? They start talking about individuals and like Jamal and Michael, and so when you're talking about the person by name, then I feel like the numbers are really small.
I love the question, and I think that this gets at something that we've been chatting about this funding conversation. I actually do think there's enough money, there's enough wealth and money in philanthropy in Milwaukee to drive the needle. The problem is we pass it out in a really, really asinine manner. And to your question, and it really does boil down to some pretty simple considerations. What is your organization up to? Is that actually needed in the market? And then what are your results? And that's how we should fund our organizations. And we have, to Carl's point, organizations with abysmal results, or a sort of an entrepreneurial culture among sort of like the up and coming generation and say, I want to start an organization so that kids can have something constructive to do after school. Well, we got 20 of those, right? And we need to eliminate 12 of them. And funnel children into the sort of most effective channels to do something constructive after school. And if we do that, and I do think that the many millions of dollars that we funnel into nonprofit organizations it can take a turn and drastically improve the rate at which we're accelerating progress here. We're passing out money in a really stupid manner.
Hello everyone, my name is Erica Mitchell. I am a mother of 6 children. I have 14 grandkids, and I'm coming through the roof. One of the things that I am doing, I work with the youth. I've been working with them since '98. I don't have a degree in anything, but I do personal training as well. I do emotional intelligence, personal growth development, because I did my own research. And in order for our children, if we as adults cannot control our emotions, how do we expect our children to control their emotions? So I'm putting together a program that's going to have a curriculum on emotional intelligence. Our children, our parents, those who are in the community that are working in leadership need to learn how to control how they speak to one another. If we can't control our emotions and how we demonstrate what we want and our needs, we're going to have a problem. We cannot operate out of anger. We have to operate out of reason, and we have to understand that it takes time. And in order for our children to get what they need, we have to understand that they have problems. They have issues. They're in their homes. They're suffering from so many different things. So if we can't give them what they need emotionally, how are we going to give them anything else?
Anyone?
So George wanted me to recap back to what the original intent, and I think we have definitely produced a lot of rich dialogue around this discussion. And as I said before, that similar to barbershop talk, it unfolds in unpredictable ways. That's what organic conversation tends to do. But I do want to engage for quite a little bit of time about some of the conversations that we've had on the poach to have these to start, and I'll let George kick it off.
Yeah, I mean, you have to understand my role. SDC is a commission on poverty. It's required to study and make demands on the community to remove barriers or put systems in place that make it easier for people to move out of poverty. I mean, it's a high-level strategic call to action for SDC. But our second role is to provide programs. So we have a double role here. But in that role, which is really where our board plays a lot in terms of the commission action, it's really about systems. It's really about systems and resources. And when we were talking on the porch, we'll call it a porch discussion versus is that we all have roles to play regardless of where we land in our careers, okay? And when I look at a gatekeeper, I'm not really trying to call them out, I'm trying to call them to action. Because if I was in my career, I've been fortunate, lucky, I'm not gonna say lucky because I really worked my butt off to get there. But I wasn't no different than the other guy that was on my neighborhood. Let's put it like that. So something worked well, and a lot of it had to do with other people helping me and paving me the way. So when I look at people who are in positions of authority who don't speak up, when I know that they also were given a lot of helping hands to get where they were, then to me you're a gatekeeper, or you're trying to protect yourself as being where you are without understanding you have a role to play to make sure that the right kinds of conversations are taking place for economic development, for education, for whatever things are barriers to keep everybody from having opportunity. And sometimes we're actually in a role or in a position where we'll be speaking to people at a corporate level, at a high level, even if it's to learn from each other and say, look, there's other ways in which we can accomplish your bottom line without not letting other people be successful, or communities to be successful. But that has to be without fear. And it has to be with courage. And we need to ask our corporations to take, we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI. You can't have that if people are afraid to talk. So I'm going to challenge our corporations that are putting that all over the place, that, you know, if you're going to ask for it, then you got to open up and let people speak without fear of being retaliated against. So they can actually speak to the issues. So they can actually ask you to speak to your issues, your truth, so we can get to learn about each other. But there's way too many people that I see in Milwaukee who have positions of authority. And I'm just going to speak to people that look like me. And I'm too old to care what they think. I really am. I'm too old. My stage in my life is this. I got something to say. I'm going to say it as long as I'm respectful. I just need you to hear what I feel. If you getting paid and you ain't speaking up, then you might want to think about retiring so we can start bringing these young guys up to speed. Because you need to stop having people there just getting a paycheck and just thinking that's okay. And right now I'm speaking to people who look like me.
I want to do a yes and no, because I understand everything that he just communicated, but I also want to bring to the light that some of us that are tagged and identified as gatekeepers, the community on a lot of occasions have no way of knowing how we are being checked in the organizations that we serve. You wouldn't believe the things that have been said to me and done to me at all three of the institutions that I serve as chief diversity officer. If I were to write a book, it would upset some communities nationwide. But what I ask us to do is to build, like I said earlier, build relationships with these individuals, because it's tough behind some of those corporate and major university doors. You know, we can go to bat all we want to, but if the president tells you to shut up, this is not what the agenda is. If the provost tells you we gonna do something a little different, that's not the kind of diversity that I wanted to bring to campus, then you can appear to have all the courage you want, but you'll be having courage and no income. And at the end of the day, people got to eat. So what I'm trying to say is that build relationships, provide some communal support for people, and then if they don't produce, then get it on their behind.
Well, Doc, I'm gonna tell you, I agree with you, and yes and. Yes and. However, I want to say to you this. I know you did say what you needed to say. I know that. And I'm not speaking to any, like I said, it's not about any particular person. If they take it that way, they can always talk to me personally. But I'm telling you, if there are people there who are not doing that, and I know that there are, that are just sitting there because they represent a face and a look that might look like it's making some decisions that are diverse, that's not right either. I challenge the corporations, and I would love to sit in front of the corporations or even other business leaders and say to you, don't do this fake diversity stuff. This stuff that says, okay, I'm gonna make sure that my board has 2 board members, and then the board members aren't really effectively being able to speak to issues that they're there supposedly to be representing. I was a diversity, hold on one second. I've been a diversity officer too. And I'm just saying that this kind of facade of inclusion is one of the reasons why we are where we are. Now, Doc, I'm not disagreeing with you. There are people that gotta pay for their paychecks and all kinds of stuff too. But we've got to figure out a way to make sure we can fight through this. You know, ladies, at one time we were not allowed, I worked in healthcare. 80% of the people in healthcare are women and 5% are in leadership. Now how is that supposed to sound right? Okay? So it's not just people of color. Okay.
I have I don't agree with Brother Grinnell, but I love him. Anyway, I think that, I ain't gonna say I don't agree with him, but I just think that it's more complex to that. I think that as individuals, we all have to set our threshold, right? And there's certain things, I'm gonna just say it, and I feel like I was looking for a job when I found this one. So if it's mean for me to leave and get up out of there, then I'll leave and walk off. And I know I'm gonna make a way to eat, so I'm not worried about that. But I'm not gonna sell my soul or my people if that's what's on the line.
I have a question, and then for those who are historians, Atlanta is what it is today because of Mayor Jackson. Right? So when we think of Mayor Jackson and we think about Milwaukee, we talk all this time we talk about gatekeepers. But as a seasoned consultant working with a lot of the nonprofits and knowing most of you on the panel, my concern is having a concrete vision of where we're going. So my question is, if you can say in 5 years, what is your hope for Milwaukee? Not as your organization, but what do you want it to look like? What do you want it to feel like? How is the interaction? So if you can kind of, I know we'll be here all day, but if you can just address that, because we have to recognize that we have a city issue, right? And because there's no vision. You know, the Bible says where there is no vision, the people perish. And we are perishing, that's why we have this conference today. So what's the vision? Not your organization. I don't want you to talk about programs. I want you to talk about the vision for Milwaukee if you had to create that vision. Okay? Thank you.
Well, Londa, thank you. I think that my vision, and this is me personally, is that people will be able to find what it is that they need with one phone call within 10 minutes instead of it taking 5 hours and sometimes never getting resolution. So that means that information is freely shared, it's available, people know how and where to access it, and they can get the issues that they need resolved. So that would be my vision in 5 years. And with as much technology that is out here, and Walter believes that the money is there, I think that, you know, that's something that we could make happen.
You said 5 words? 5 words for the 5-year vision. We need to return to fundamentals. We need to treat everybody with dignity. There's no dignity in this city, not on the level it needs to be. There's no equity in this city, and I envision equity. And I mean, well, I'm an optimist. Since you said my vision, that's my vision. That's my prayer. Mental health. We have to stop policing poverty, policing mental health, policing substance abuse. We have nothing, very little, pardon me, to offer folks that are addicted to alcohol or drugs, that are suffering from a myriad mental health issues, or that are wrestling with acute poverty. And if we have solutions to these, we'll have solutions to most of what we see, I think.
5 years.
we will be on the road to a community that really embraces shared prosperity. We will be a community that understands the value of education and entrepreneurship are the great equalizers in a democratic society. We will be a community that when someone flies into Joe Mitchell Airport and catches Lyft or either Uber or a cab on their way to the hotel, that cab driver or that Uber driver or that Lyft driver is telling that passenger how entrepreneurial and innovative this community is. That happened to me 4 years ago. 4 years ago, when I flew into Austin, Texas, and was on my way to the AT&T Conference Center to attend a conference there. The cab driver educated me on the new innovations taking place in Austin, which makes it the #1 entrepreneurial city in America. If we can have that level of understanding of progress and empowerment by someone who is delivering that kind of service, what does that say about us as a city with a brand new brand? And it doesn't make a difference who the mayor is or who's at the local level in terms of elected officials. Because basically, they just need to get out of the way, period. Share prosperity, understanding that entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship and education are the great equalizers in a democratic society.
In 5 years. So one of the projects we're working on at UWITA with the city is this like 5-year strategic plan for HUD. It's very boring. But one of the questions we've been asking people in focus groups is, what do you love about the city or the neighborhood you live in? And every time we do this, I'm just amazed because it's always the same answers, but not the exact same answers. And so in 5 years, I want to live in a city where we see our commonalities more than our differences, where it's too easy to just be like, I live in this neighborhood or I know these people, but people challenge themselves to meet people who are different from them and they experience all the things that they have to offer. And then one more really specific one, I want a regional transit authority with dedicated local funding for our transportation system.
5 years, so we have 35,000 students in Milwaukee who attend schools that have only been perpetually failing schools for the past decade. I get to say that because I went to some of these schools growing up. In 5 years, I think we can eliminate those 35,000 students, eliminate the seats that those 35,000 students sit in. In doing so, we will have doubled, in 5 years, doubled the on core academic and socio-economic, socio-emotional metrics, double the amount of progress that our students are making. Things like third grade reading and 8th grade math and post-secondary readiness and a whole litany of other sort of socio-economic, or excuse me, socio-emotional metrics. We will have doubled the amount of progress. And the progress is so low on those things that we could feasibly double that in 5 years. And then lastly, we've got in place through lots of organizations like this, but also sort of a citywide effort to actually retain the talent that we're producing with the increase in high quality seats that we're gonna have in our education system. The thing that maybe keeps me up the most at night about what we do in Milwaukee is that even when we succeed, even when you read stories in the paper about schools that are just really knocking it out of the park, what we're doing is preparing those students to leave Milwaukee for college and never to return, or to leave Milwaukee shortly after college, never to return. All of my friends, especially women, especially people of color from my time at Marquette, are in places like the Bay, Chicago, Atlanta, DC, New York, et cetera. And if we're actually going to get serious about eliminating poverty or moving Milwaukee off the bottom of the list that you don't want your city on, then we're going to need actual intrepid, diverse talent to do that. And right now, it's the status quo that we're producing not enough of that talent. And the little bit that we are producing, they're going to be awesome somewhere else. And we need them here to do that. And so I think we can make meaningful progress or achieve all of those things in 5 years.
I'm a community action agency, and we're failing. In 5 years, I would like to see this organization not be failing its community. Because how in the heck can I be saying that I've been in war on poverty for 55 years and we've gone to the bottom of everything in this city? So we got to reverse this. I personally feel responsible to help this city reverse these outcomes with all of you as partners. Now, I'm not going to let you off. I'm not letting anybody off the hook. But we need to do better. We can't continue to just nibble at stuff. We gotta really make some changes, because just like, if it's true, and I'm not gonna say it is or isn't because I'm not a scientist, that in the next 10 years, we're gonna have impacted this earth in a way that's gonna affect my grandchildren, I'm not happy with that. I'm not happy that we're so short-sighted as a human species that we would do that much damage to generations that's coming next to us. So, you know, I feel the same way about our city. We've been damaging the heck. I hate that we have all these things coming out saying we're the bottom of this and the bottom of that. We should be embarrassed. I'm not even at the point where I'm a Marine, so when people tend to talk like some of us ain't supposed to be here, that really pisses me off. Because why in the heck did I go sign myself up to get shot at? You didn't tell me I ain't supposed to be here. And I represent other military people from generations who said, we belong here, this is ours too. I don't like what's happened to the people who are immigrants. Now, my people weren't immigrants, but they came from somewhere else. But the stuff that we see, what I see, are some of the same things that used to be done to other people a long time ago. And for us to sit so quietly and let that happen without a voice is ridiculous. And I know a lot of these young people out here that have a voice and they need to be heard. They need to be taken seriously. We need to start making some moves based on what they have to say. I hope that I can retire in 5 years, and that others are taking my place to make the changes necessary for this community to start to heal itself. So that's what I need to see.
Could I share something? I'd like to see the city of Milwaukee being controlled by the citizens of Milwaukee, and that the urban suburbs would be partners, but not the controllers.
I would like to see full and unfettered access to high-quality education, to safe communities, communities that are not oversaturated with a police state, but communities that are being protected. And you know, when you brought up the climate issues, and I'm a believer that we are facing global climate change. We have to recognize that Milwaukee is a special place. Milwaukee is the only majority-minority city in the United States sitting on the large body of fresh water. When we know that in the next 10 years, water is a commodity now, right? So if we're not getting our things together, well, there's people who's going to want that resource. Already. Yeah, with that 5 million gallons a day that Foxconn will be using, they're only going to put back 3 million of the 5 every day. So 2 million, I don't know where that 2 million gallons are going. Any other questions?
You didn't want to ask me? No, you can always ask. I feel bad.
Thank you. First, I want to say thank you to SDC and Marquette for hosting this. It's been a wonderful experience to hear the kind of speakers that you had and to talk about the real issues of the city of Milwaukee. Number one, in the idea of what is the city going to look like in 5 years, we talked about a lot of the wants and needs of that, but we didn't talk about any strategies. What strategies are we going to use to accomplish those areas? We talked about education, in that. So what strategies are we going to use to be able to look at the education system, especially at the K-12 level, and talk about how we're going to approach, how we're going to change that. Dr. Bell talked about STEM, and that is the future for the next generation, next 2 or 3 generations of that. How are we going to, again, implement and put those kind of things in place in the education system? Talk about post-secondary. I just retired from MATC after 41 years. I started off there as a student, and my last job when I retired as of June 28th of this year, I was the Dean of the School of Technology and Applied Sciences. So we have to put strategies together to reach these goals. We can talk about all of these anecdotal kinds of things, but as a community itself, we have to build strategies. Collaboration is one of those strategies, and building relationships with corporate America who have opportunities out there for our young people. For the young lady that talked about the students that she's working with, how do we get them certificates? Because we work with corporations who allow them to get youth apprenticeship opportunities that connect to adult apprenticeships. So we have to build strategies to get to these points. And again, thank you, George and Marquette, for hosting this. I had a great time and enjoyed all of the activities. Thank you.
I'm really glad that you said that, because as much as I recommend, I do believe that we have to think. We have to think through what to do. We keep throwing things at the problem without really studying what would really work. And I hope, at least I know our board is going in the direction, the commission is going in the direction that we need to study and try to truly understand what we need to recommend to this community. Because I don't want to recommend, oh, we need to help people graduate. That don't mean anything. There's a reason why that's not happening, and we're not studying it, we're talking about it enough. So Doc knows, and we talk about it all the time, that we really want to, one of the partnerships, the opportunity with Marquette from my perspective, UWM and MATC and other universities in MSOE, is to really talk about, we got scientists working on stuff, but we're not even working together with the practitioners and the community about what are some models, what's going on. We see data about what the outcomes are, but we haven't dug into the whys. And then we need to put strategies around those that's going to actually do some of the things that we need to do to move the needle in this city. But if we keep it's almost like you were saying, that we just keep giving money to the same old, to people and they're not doing the real work. It's the same thing as just giving money because you think that's the right answer. I don't see any of that really making a difference either. So we've got, it's not, and I'll take the money, believe me, until we figure this out. I need the money to keep my folks employed if nothing else. But I would say that I know that that's not going to work if we don't think about what the answers are to these issues so we can work together as a community in a more effective way. And somebody said something about, we do have to get our suburban areas to understand that they need to partner with us around answers and not control what's going on in the city. I have been in Milwaukee a long time. The segregation that started as a small set of geographic area in the city has expanded now into a suburban strategy that surrounds the city. And it's still the same thing. And we've got to get in front of this, talk about it, and say, how are we going to truly get rid of this kind of thing? We're at the point now, we got the Latinx community segregated from the African American community, separated from the Asian community, separated from the white community. It's like, we just keep doing it over and over again. We got to stop this, it's insane.
I'm just gonna close with this one final thought when you're ready to close. Okay. Okay. So we need to come together, we need to collaborate, we all agree on that. We also need to agree to disagree, but still not stop that ball from rolling, okay? If you leave with nothing else, Leave with that. You are not gonna always agree with a strategy, how something is going, etc. If you are in a position to, stop that progress or whatever, and you do it because you can't get your way, that's not the way to go, okay? You have to agree to disagree, come to some compromise, and keep the ball moving, all right? Because that's what it's going to take for us to see any of these beautiful 5-year plans that I hope we see to come to fruition. And I went first and said not a lot because I'm not that 5 years is a short amount of time. But that's what I need you all to lead with, okay? Everybody has a place. I don't care if you are, what you consider to be like, administrative, if you're executive level, C-suite, whatnot. It's gonna take everybody, but agree to disagree and keep the ball rolling, because we're not gonna argue.
Can I just add something real quick? We gotta get away from this Republican, Democratic, liberal, conservative. That stuff is stupid. We come from different perspectives, so what? That's the beauty of diversity. And then we keep trying to say, oh, you don't think like me, then I'm not going. No, that's not the way it's supposed to work. The beauty of diversity and inclusion is you listen to people who come from different perspectives. It's not a race thing. It's a thinking thing. It's an experience thing. It's coming from different perspectives. We gotta stop fighting. We gotta stop fighting each other like with these weird things like race. It was created by us in the United States. There wasn't such a thing as race once upon a time, y'all.
Georgia start one
So we need one. So that might be SDC's next summer next year is coming up with a think tank. That'd be cool.
Hi, sorry. So I'm actually still a student at UWM. I'm a senior graduating in the spring, and I'm hearing you guys talk a lot about what older generations can do, but then what the generation that's coming after me can do. But what about us? We don't have the capital to get elected to office or start a business right now, but how can we actually create change other than with our tweets?
So it's a great question. I happen to work directly with college students. I lectured on your campus, Alverno, Marquette, and UW-Madison, a 4-day period. We've got a Student Alliance on campus. We're happy to teach you how to advocate and how to lobby. There's a lot you can do directly on policy. If you let any of us know what issues specifically you're interested in, we can connect you with the people that are shaking and moving in that direction. So what I've heard is that there are an incredible number of issues, from transportation to innovation to education to poverty, mental health, policing. And really, if we guard the whole waterfront, we're going to drop the ball on some of these issues. The think tank is good for strategy, but we need specific, skilled people who are pushing certain areas forward. So if we can decide where we want to put our strength, we do that, and then we make sure we're convening with the other people as well. And if I see a young professional back I've known for a long time. If you want to reach out and connect with folks, I'm looking at Obi. There's a lot of folks, and if you approach any of us afterwards and let us know where your interest area is, I'm happy to connect you with that. And there are talented people like Kaylin Haywood Jr. and other folks that have graduated. There are 4 sitting state representatives who came to my youth program. There's a lot of, it just really depends on your specific area. And the gatekeepers will try to keep you shut out, but they're also afraid of your tweets.
I'll take a slightly different bend and say just get off Twitter. I'm halfway. I'm only halfway joking. I'd say 2 things. At Marquette, the Educational Opportunity Program through which I came, just celebrated its 50th anniversary. There's a guy who started this, Walanda, the guy who started this some time ago was named Arnold Mitchum. I know some folks in the room are familiar. And Dr. Mitchum told me something when I graduated from Marquette that stuck with me and I think is applicable here. He said, as a young person, all you have in the world is your time and your energy. Devote both well. You don't have yet, for the most part, lots of us don't have families to look after, you don't have a ton of wealth yet, you have time and energy. If you spend both of those strategically, then you'll be able to make real impact. So I'll leave that quote with you, and then I'll just say that, like, when I'm talking about the up-and-coming generation, I'm not talking about the folks after you, I'm talking about you. And, you know, and to the Dr. Mitchell quote, I'd say to you and to Brittany and to Obi and to others, the fact that you're spending time here at this, I think is an example of devoting your time and your energy well. So continue to do things like that. And then as you chart your course, the biggest mistake I see people, especially recent college grads, make is that they chart a course that's solely driven by the ability to make money. And that is important. I don't want to diminish, you know, the idea that you want to experience some economic mobility, make money, buy a house, raise kids, all that kind of stuff. Like, you need money to do that, and so, but money isn't the sort of sole determinant, or should not be the sole determinant in how you chart your course. There's also the idea of sort of what impact do you want to make in the world. And I would say that, like, what the advice I would give is to have a really rigorous theory of change. You know, you have seen, you're young, but you know, like some of the other folks, and I would consider myself still for a couple more days young. You have seen so much and experienced so much, and the way that you have understood your educational journey and contextualized where you sit and gaze outward and look at the ecosystem and look at the sort of neighborhood that you grew up in, so on and so forth. There's a lot there, and forming a theory that's really rigorous, really laser-like, that says, what is it that, what is the change that I want to make? What do I need to study in order to get there, and how do I need to order my steps in order to make that impact, is the advice that I give to this. This is what we do at our organization at Teach for America. We recruit people, and they start their sort of journeys with the profound active classroom teaching. But the real point of what we're doing, no matter how long they stay in the classroom, is to get them to sort of understand how they sit within the world around them, and to figure out exactly what they want to do about it, and to go off and sort of like set the world ablaze doing just that. And lots of, you know, there's a reason why, you know, we have 8 sitting state chiefs of education in the country who are Teach for America alums. That started way back when they graduated from college, to say, like, what's your theory, and what do you want to do about it? How are you forming a theory? Who's helping you pressure test the theory, and then order your steps against that theory, not just what will get you into sort of the next tax bracket.
And know that can change, right? Like, it changes over time. And again, advocating for the nonprofit sector, even though we do have lots of them, but we love people who have time and energy, who want to help us build out things, that all the policy work that we've talked about that needs to be done. That's just someone's ability to learn and engage and donate their time and, well, work with. So the transportation issue I worked on, the only way that's going to change is when we get elected officials in office who are actually interested in solving the transportation issue. But that requires us probably to think about, we need to get some of those people out, we need to change the balance of that. So are we looking at fair redistricting? It's like, that's where my head's going. And so to your point, I'm trying to think of, I'm 43 years old. I have a very busy life, but there's one thing I think I want to work on now, and maybe voting and, you know, elective representation is where I'm going to put my energy, my personal time. And so I think for everybody who feels like they have nothing to do or they don't know where, it's like, take the time to think about, what can I do in the next couple of years? Can I just focus on that one thing? Can I find an organization to do that with? And see where it takes me, because you never know, and that might change over time. And so it's not necessarily about the monetary resources or even the educational background. How this works is just someone's willingness to engage in it and, like, to think and learn those skills along the way.
We got one last question, we're gonna wrap up.
So I just wanted to thank you guys for putting on this conference, anyone who was involved in it, because it just confirmed for me all the issues that I've been talking to my colleagues about. I wish they all could be here. But I am that spokesperson at my work, and I will continue to be that spokesperson until I'm terminated, and George, I'm gonna come to you for a job. But I also want to share that I am a mental health provider, and I recently started a private practice. In that planning and developing stage, I've experienced with Black people, especially competition. When I'm reaching out for information, when I'm asking for assistance and helping me to navigate through the business world because I don't have a business degree, there's this look at, oh, she might be better than me, or we're competing for clientele, or whatever it is. So I'm just asking publicly for any of you mentorship helping me to navigate through the systems, because that has been a barrier to me being successful, and offering ways that I can give back to the Black community as far as mental health goes, because that is one of my purposes.
Okay, so the young folks, y'all be careful out there. I talked to Howard Fuller years ago when I was real young, and I was like ready to do exactly what I'm talking about way back then, and he said to me, get an education, get some experience, and then get enough power to actually make a difference. Don't sacrifice your career. Now, that doesn't mean you have to just take things, but leave it to us old cats that can afford to do it. And I challenge us to stop trying to be safe. But but at the same time, you know what I think my role is right now? Right now, I'm trying to brain dump as much as I can to every one of my young leaders, so that and tell them about all the mistakes I made, all the good things that I did, but all the things that I had to learn to get there, so that there's not the same mistake going over again. We've got to do generational dumps. And we've got to do it fast, because the world's changing quickly, and we need to begin to get the next generation ready for some of these things that we know are out there. And but so yes, we'll make sure that you're okay. But I would also consult with you and ask you, you got to be very wise and cunning around how you approach power, because you don't have the power to fight against power at this point in your career.
Can we all give this panel a round of applause? Thank you all.